These are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar of our Office Lean series. Today's webinar will be about 5S, which is a workplace organization method. And we thank BHK Center for Excellence for providing funding for this webinar series. Today's presenter will be Amy Quinn, who is our President and CEO at Great Lakes Center for Youth Development. And I'm the Director of Operations here at the Center, and I'll be here to help you throughout the webinar. We hope you have our annual nonprofit conference marked on your calendar. It's just a few weeks away. You can see a few sample workshops that are on the screen, and you can visit our website for more workshops. I believe our list is pretty much complete now. We have a Good Friday, so we hope you'll join us on that day for a great training opportunity. Tomorrow night, we're going to be having a State Innovation Plan meeting. This is an opportunity to have your voice heard about a new model that's being developed for health system transformation. The state received a $1.7 million grant to develop this system, and there are going to be state representatives here to get the UP's voice. So we're trying to encourage everyone to participate and get the UP voice heard on that. So please join us tomorrow night for that, and the information's on the screen. The next slide will show you how you can raise your hand if you have a question, and also we'll have an opportunity for questions that you can type in the box there where it says type questions, and we'll take breaks throughout the webinar to see and answer those questions. Okay, at this time we're going to turn it over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is our last webinar, so I wanted to make sure we reviewed webinars 1 through 3 very briefly, but this is somewhat like the capstone of Office Lean and hopefully launching all of you into more efficient ways of doing your work and reducing your overhead and having happier staff and volunteers and board members and funders. So to go back to the basics, the foundation that Office Lean is built upon, which also came from lean manufacturing, which, as you may remember, has a history in the Toyota production system and being developed in Japan. It's very Japanese culture oriented, and so the philosophy is very much about processes and making sure you have great processes to help keep people from making mistakes, and you don't point the fingers actually on people. And the major premise for Office Lean is to identify waste versus looking at your value-added activities. Now, as I go through these debriefing, what I would like you to do is anything that doesn't ring a bell or you're still not clear about, please put your question in the chat box and we can talk about it. But you should know about the looking at processes and not people. You should know what the difference is between waste and value add and how to help identify waste versus value add. You should understand the philosophy of flipping the pyramid and why that's important, where you actually hear the voice of the customer, and you also go to the Gemba, which is where the work is being done, and you make sure and use cross-functional teams for almost all of the Office Lean principles that we've discussed so far. And then also you should be familiar with Kaizen, which is a continuous improvement philosophy of always looking at how you can make things better. Those are more of the philosophies behind Office Lean, and now we'll talk about the tactics and the tools that we've used throughout the 3 webinars. So make sure, check and see if these ring a bell to you. The Poka-Yoke, which is, I always automatically think about the gas tether on our cars now. It's like fail-proof or dummy-proof systems. Value stream maps for complex processes or procedures that you may do often in your work. Prioritizing using an effort impact matrix. determining your scope through Frame It, and then also looking at the root of issues and the true cause of waste by asking the 5 whys, working out solutions quickly by try-storming, because crude and fast while you're working on Office Lean, crude and fast is better than slow and perfect. And then a Kaizen event, which is an event that takes planning and processing and then definitely follow-up to be able to really take apart something. Usually you've done a value stream map for it. Take apart one of your processes and figure out how to improve it. And obviously, across the board, something that's very important is figuring out what you want to measure, such as your matrix and how you want to measure that, and what matrix you're going to use, and then making sure you continually and visually report your progress, and that Office Lean becomes integrated into your organization's culture. So at this time, I will pause and see if there are any questions about any of these things that you would like a little refresher before we move on. I also wanted to insert this slide on the food for thought again. A lot of times in our culture, our Western culture, it's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I know that's not good English on the screen. I can't remember where I took this quote, but you look at that versus an Office Lean culture of, Kaizen, continuous improvement, doing it better and making it better, even if it isn't broken, because if we can't, then those who compete with us will do that. And a lot of times in nonprofits, we don't think about competition, but there really are new nonprofits being formed every day. And just because you may offer a certain service doesn't mean that someone else can't come in and offer it and have better ideas or more efficient ways for offering it. So I'm not saying that to make you paranoid or scare you. I'm just saying having this mindset is a really great mindset for having a very efficient operation, efficient organization, to be able to deliver quality services and prove to funders that you are a wise investment. Karen, do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing any so far.
Okay, thank you. Keep in mind at any time, feel free to put questions in the chat box and we will make sure and get them answered. I always also want to say, please, if you have a question, ask it. You've heard the cliche, there's no dumb question except one that's not asked. And really that's true, because if you have the question, then most likely several others do as well. And I will not call you out. Like, I won't say your full name, may not even say your first name. So don't be concerned that I may embarrass you. That's a great thing about a webinar, is it's fairly anonymous. Now, on to 5S. What in the world is 5S? It is it's a methodology and a framework for workplace organization. And it's a way to practice identifying and eliminating waste, and which is one of the major tenets. That's the whole principle of Office Lean. So this is another tool to help you look for, identify, and eliminate waste and being more efficient. And it's much more beyond housekeeping. It's not just having a clean work environment, although that is important, because clean environments usually lead to safe environments, and especially if you are providing direct services where your clients come to your office, it also shows that you care about what you do. And having a cluttered or messy workspace, whether you want to admit it or not, really, it does speak about you. And believe me, I am speaking to myself just as much as I'm speaking to you. And in a few slides, you'll see why, because I'm going to show you a picture of my desk. So I am willing to learn this right along with you. Actually, I am learning this right along with you. But 5S is so much more than just keeping things clean. It you work to create a functionally organized work environment, because even though it's clean, it doesn't mean that it is functionally organized. In other words, are things located in places where it makes the most sense and it is the best use for those different items functionally. I have to tell you a quick story. Okay, I went to a restaurant. I won't call what it is, but it's not fast food, but it's quick food and it's good quality food. I went there and someone had ordered a mixed drink. And so we watched the person behind the register fix this drink for the person ahead of us. And they had to go into the cooler to get limes and then the salt container and do the salt. It was margarita, so do the salt around the glass. Then they had to go across the walkway or across the restaurant to the drive-in window to get ice, and then back to where the registers were to get the margarita mix. And my husband and I were looking and we're like, wow, that is just not efficient. So while it was a very clean environment, the way that they fix margaritas is not functionally organized at all. So that's the difference here with 5S. It seems very simple, but the more you dig into it, the more you realize it actually is complex. And when you think about waste in your office environment, a big part of waste is looking for information or looking for supplies. And this is another way, again, for eliminating that waste. This is also one of the first office lean methods that are normally implemented in any organization. So you may be asking, why didn't we do this first? Well, I didn't want you to get this information and think that that's all there was to office lean, and then you clean your desk and, wow, I'm done. Because there's so much more than that. And as you have learned, hopefully through webinars 1 through 3, especially number 1 about the philosophy and the history of office lean, there's so much more than simply having an organized workspace. So you're probably all wondering, okay, what are the 5 S's? Well, here they are, and I don't feel like practicing my Japanese today, but here you see these are the Japanese terms that come up with the original 5S. And then I've also added the English translation. But you can also be happy to know that people much smarter than I have also added the 5 S's in an English term. And keep in mind that different resources you read may say these a little differently, but it's all the same principle. You sort, you set in order, or you set things in place, you shine, in other words, clean, you standardize how you have things organized, and then you make sure and sustain it, which, as we all know, big part of office lean also is making sure that you continue with the process and that you keep it sustained. And here is a flow chart demonstrating each of the 5 steps, and you'll notice the arrows to show that it's a continuous process. Now you may be wondering, or if you're like me, I have a messy desk because a lot of times I think, I don't have time to file this away or do something with this because, maybe you have a grant that's due or a client that's walking into the office, and well, that just stack of papers will just have to be, filed some other time. I know that's my thinking a lot of times. But really, if you think about it, 5S and office lean in general, it's capacity building. And here's where I get on my soapbox as GLCYD, because we do a lot of capacity building for nonprofits. And really, capacity building is so important for long-term sustainability of your organization. And I like this slide and how it explains capacity building. And that's really what we're talking about today. Taking time to stop, to reevaluate things, to be more organized so that in the future you can actually move faster. And very much like you've heard, you have to go slow to go fast. And that's really what office lean is all about. You're going slow, you're going to be more intentional, but it will be amazing how much quicker you can get things done and in a much more efficient way. So on to the steps. Step number 1, you want to sort. And we're going to spend a lot of times on step 1 and quite a bit of time on step 2. They are the most important steps. So number 1, you want to select your project scope. And for me, personally, I'm going to start with my desk. And as I said, you'll know why in a minute. But I'm going to start with my own personal workspace so I can work through the process and prepare to train other staff. It can be your own personal workspace. It can be, and another area to start is common spaces, such as a supply room or a conference room or a a working room that you may have, a common, not just supplies, but a common work area like that has the copier and stapler and that type of thing. So select your workspace because, again, you want to define your project scope. You don't want to start, maybe you do this at home, you start organizing the closet and the next thing you know you have the whole house torn apart. It's too big of a process to do that. So start with a small scope and then you can celebrate your success and move on to larger projects. Photograph your workspace prior to starting. And this is what I'm saying. This is my actual desk taken earlier this week. And you can see all the piles. And I put the arrows on the 3 main workplaces that I have because I couldn't crop out the background without eliminating some of my workspace. So you can see it's a mess. And I'm being very candid and transparent right now. And my commitment is that by November 1st, it will look much different. It will be very organized, and I will send you all a picture on November 1st and tell you a little bit about how my 5S in my own personal workspace, how that project went for me. So that's my commitment to you. Once you've figured out your workspace and you've taken a picture of it to see what your starting point is, you want to gather your cross-functional team. And you should have heard about cross-functional team before now. Remember, in your cross-functional team, it may not be appropriate if you're only doing your workspace, but if you're doing a common or work room, such as a supply room or your work room, gather a cross-functional team, the people that use it the most. And that, don't forget, that could include volunteers and even board members. But gather your team because you need various perspectives for how the workspace should be used. And then it's very important to define the purpose of that workspace. If you don't know the main purpose for it, and you all need to be in alignment on what the main purpose is because you're going to start sorting what should be in the workspace and what shouldn't. So you have to know why it's being used. And then determine a staging area for unnecessary items. And this is an area that you will want to have common for the whole office, to have a common area or a common staging area. Next should be a lot of fun. Remove all the items from the workspace. Yes, it includes papers and filing and those types of things. Remove all the items. Then you have it completely empty, because you'll need it empty to be able to plan. And obviously, while you're removing things, the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and throw away or recycle items that just don't need to be there, because that's less, those are less items that you would need to sort. So remember to use your garbage can and recycling bin while you are removing everything from your office or the workspace. So you have everything removed. Now, how do you begin to start sorting? Well, the easiest thing is to have 5 buckets. And while I have a picture of a bucket there, you don't have to use an actual bucket. You can have designated areas for piles of items. You can have big totes, whatever works for you, but 5 separate places for these items. And this could be used in Head Start, child care centers, or at-home providers can use this when you're looking at inventorying your curriculum or your or the toys that you have, and looking at how you use the space and does it make sense based on the flow of children and where they go and the items that they use in certain spaces of your home or of your center. So first you want to look at and have a bucket or a pile for the items that you need regularly. And then the items that you need, but not very regularly, maybe once or twice a year. And then I'm sure we're all guilty of we need staplers, but do we need 10 bucks of staples in our desk? And so items that we need, but we don't need them in the quantities that we have them. And keep in mind, once your workspace is organized and the supply closet is organized, you won't have to hoard 3 rolls of tape and 2 notepads and 10 boxes of staples, because you know that the supply closet is efficient and you have a process for never running out of inventory, which we're going to discuss later on as well. So this helps eliminate hoarding and also helps you get a better handle of your office supplies and other supplies in your inventory. And then the items wanted but not needed. This is not a force you to give up everything that makes you enjoy your workplace. And finally, a pile items for removal. Now, if you're like me, it's really hard to figure out which pile some of these go into. So some decision-making tools or questions may be, what is the item's purpose in the workspace? Because remember, we talked about what's the workspace's purpose. And then, has the item been used in the past few months? And is there a newer version making this one obsolete? Like, do you have old phone books lying around? Or is the item redundant? Do you have several different copies of something? Do you have a paper copy and an electronic copy? And do you need both? And obviously, when you're in doubt, move it out. And you may be like me, where you just feel like you want to pull your hair out. But you'll see November 1st, you'll get an update on how it went. So you have these 5 different buckets or totes or piled up items in 5 different areas. Now, what do you do with them? So now we need to empty the buckets. And before I go on, I will stop because I've already given you quite a bit of information and just see if there are any questions so far about the sorting process.
I do have one question. Quick question about cross-functional teams. For projects like a personal workspace, who would be the other members of the team and what would their roles be?
That's a great question. If you're doing your own workspace, then you don't necessarily need to have a cross-functional team unless you share workspace with someone, if you job share or if you share workspace, or if you have an assistant that tends to be at your that tends to use your desk a lot or leave items for you or that type of thing. And even then, you may recruit them for help, or it may just be you decide your own system. And for example, if they're bringing you mail, this may be where you want it placed, or this is how you want them to handle it for you. But for the most part, I have a feeling most all of us, for our personal workspaces, that would just be us. And I think that even though you could have the cleanest workspace and be very organized, like our Director of Operations, Karen Thompson, and you still could go through 5S and you may identify, most likely you will identify things that could change to make it even more functional for you. So I would encourage everyone, start your 5S process with your own personal workspace. That gives you a chance to kind of pilot it and work through it once and experiment. Then you can start rolling it out to others in the organization and using the common areas throughout your organization. Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you for that question. That was good. So items that are needed regularly, you want to find a convenient place for them. And as a first step, what I would do is I would kind of put them where I think they would be most convenient or easiest to grab. I read one book where it recommended you need to have access to everything you use regularly within 30 seconds. And so that's just a guideline that they recommended. So find a convenient place. And then items that are needed but not regularly, find a logical location. They do not fit into that 30-second test. It's more like find a logical location. Plus, you don't use them regularly, so you'll need to remember where you put them. That's why I put find a logical location. And then items needed but in smaller quantities, obviously, remove the excess. You know, there's no need for your extra quantities. And then the items that you would like, but that they aren't needed, that's where you could set them in a common area and ask other teams, other people, if they would like them. We actually had this earlier this week. We had someone clean out the cupboards, and I said anything that doesn't belong in the cupboards in this room or in the supply room, put it out on the table. And at our staff meeting, I said, you know, everyone, if you want it, take it, or by the week's end, it's gone. It'll be donated or whatnot. It will be disposed of appropriately. Keep in mind, if you're in a large organization or if you're a staff member and not a team, a management team member, you may need to get permission before you remove items, or I should say before you donate items. It may be something that is a larger item that happens to be on the inventory list and depreciation schedule, something along those lines. So just make sure you move it up the chain to get approval before you toss something or donate it. And then the items that you know need to be removed from your workplace and no one else wants them, you can red tag them. And so this is another way for helping to get approval or to find out if another team member would like it, is to red tag. So what in the world does red tag mean? In another book I read, it said blue tag. And I guess, I don't know, maybe he had something against red tagging. But I know in manufacturing, they have various tags for various things. And like when I was working at a grain facility, grain and feed mill, we had a lockout, tag out procedure for working on equipment, and those tags were red. So that may be why this man selected blue. Most often, most common is red tag. Really, it's your organization. And so for small nonprofits where most of us that I'm speaking to are the managers or on management team, use whatever color you want to, in my opinion. But if you are with a larger organization or with a manufacturing organization, you would want to, check to see what the appropriate color is. And if you're with a manufacturer, they most likely already have some type of tagging system. Every item gets tagged, every item. And on the tagging, you want to make sure you have who it's, your name for tagging it, the date that you're tagging it, where it originally came from, and why you're tagging it. And this picture is a little fuzzy, but you can see all these pinkish red tags in this common area place. You can also see how that looks quite messy. And so it's another incentive to make sure the common area and the red tag items get addressed. And so you tag the item, you move it to the staging area, and you make sure and document all the tagged items. So you create this tag log. So back here in this picture, maybe they have a document on the wall or a big flip chart that shows the tag number for what the item is and information from the tag, what the item is, who tagged it, when should it be dealt with, and that type of thing. So you want to keep your tag log visible so that people know how to match up what's in this space and what needs to happen with it. And then you also want to determine a system. And here it goes back to your cross-functional team as well. This is really the red tagging is very cross-functional team oriented versus your own personal workspace. But you want to determine your system for disposing or moving the tagged items in a timely manner. And one of the books that I bought that I was researching, it had a sample tag log. So I hope you all can see this, but I thought it was a really nice example. And if you want some of these examples or whatnot, please feel free to email me afterwards, and I can email you more of the samples that I have from the book. But for example, this is the book that he talks about, the blue tag. So it has a tag number, what the item is, where he found it, who's responsible for taking action, and why it's red tagged, and by when should this happen. And so you can see, and you can even go to how, but your system does not have to be this complicated, who, what, when, where, how. The key is that it's obvious, that anyone walking in can see, oh, that's a printer, and it was found in a cubicle, and it is no longer needed in this area, so it's not in good working condition, so someone needs to get rid of it. Okay, any questions before we move to step 2? Any questions around sorting and red tagging?
We don't have a question, but we had a great comment, a suggestion around where you're placing the items that you need regularly, that someone suggested placing them on the side of your dominant hand.
I like that. Very, very nice. Okay, well, once you have everything sorted and you've removed the items that you don't need in that particular workspace, and you have them somewhat in order where you think you want to have it, where you think it's most functional, step 2 is set in order. And it's also can be called straighten or systematic arrangement. But that is the second S, set in order, systematic arrangement, or straighten. And it's really the premise of a place for everything and everything in its place. But again, remember, it's not just being clean and organized, it's being functionally organized. Eventually, you want to determine a permanent storage location for all the items. And as I mentioned, functionally placed, not just organized. And then you want to visually identify the items' locations, and I'll show you more about that. You want to make sure and label and have signage for where everything goes. Again, you want a new person to be able to walk into your workspace. You want your assistant to come to your actual desk and know where to put everything. You want a newer employee to come into the workroom with the copier and everything and know where to find everything and where to put things back where they go. So you want it to be obvious, and having labels and signage really help. And then Kanban cards are for inventory management. And this is basically, I'll actually go into more detail around that, but that comes into play in step 2 as well. And you can see here how clean and for the limited space they have, it is pretty orderly in this picture. You can also label, like for your document retention, put everything from the same year in one place, and then you can say, remove after X date, and then okay, I can get rid of this box, and you don't have a ton of paperwork. I remember when I went to the Child Advocacy Center in Colorado when I was the executive director, I went into our storage shed, and I'm not joking, I found paperwork, like non-critical paperwork from 15 years prior. And I remember thinking, why are they keeping these things? And so we tend to do that because, again, we don't have a system. Most organizations don't have a system for dealing with that unless you move offices. For the most part, it just builds up. and this helps prevent that. So how do you set things in order and make sure that you have them in places where you want them? Well, first of all, make a layout of your workplace. You see two examples here. One is for the office floor. There's 4 cubicles on the left, and on the right is someone's actual desk or workspace. You have everything removed out and you have a layout, and that can help you decide and look at, okay, what's the best use for this space given its purpose? And then you plan where the items should be located and test those locations. This is a great time, especially if you're working in a cross-functional team, to try storm or, for example, go through scenarios. Let's say you as an employee organize you come together as a team and you decide, okay, here's where we think all the supplies should be, and here's where we think we should store various things. And then you have someone on your team that may be a volunteer, and you say, okay, let's run through a scenario. You, as a volunteer, you come in. What do you normally use from here? And is it obvious? Is it functional? Does it make sense? And so if not, okay, let's try it again. Let's switch things around and try it again. That's try storming. You put things in place, quickly run through some scenarios. If it works, great. If not, try it again. And then you label or give a home address for all the items. And again, make it obvious. One thing I really liked about this picture and why I included it, I like the top pegboard. This reminds me, when I was in high school, I took vocational agriculture, and so we had a shop, and we had metal welding and various metalworking tools. We also have various carpentry tools and mechanic tools. It was incredible the amount of tools that we had and all the various parts and pieces. In this shop, someone had gone and figured out where everything goes, a lot like this pegboard, but then when you remove the item, there was an outline, a painting of what that item was. So you could always tell where like if you grabbed a hammer, you could tell where it came from because there's an empty hammer painted on the pegboard. So that's an idea for calling a home address. That was its permanent place, and it was very obvious and easy to see if something was missing or if I grabbed something where I need to put it. I know in an office environment it's not realistic to go and be painting scissors on in cupboards or whatnot. But you can come up with ideas for making it obvious, like with your labels, with organized baskets, with shelving and labeling the shelving. But that's another reason cross-functional teams can help, because as you run through the scenarios, is it obvious where these things are housed and why they're housed where they are? And then I mentioned the Kanban cards. This is inventory control. It helps to keep people from hoarding, but it also ensures you never run out of your critical inventory. So for example, if you may have seen even in a paper file, like if you have a common fax cover sheet, you may have a folder near the fax machine that has several copies, and then on the back one, it'll have a sticky note that says original, make more copies. That's a very simplistic form of a Kanban card. In other words, you don't run out, you know when you're getting low, and you can order more. There's examples of charts in the book where, let's say you have your supply room and you have your rolls of tape, and the office manager knows when we start getting below 10 rolls of tape, I need to order more because we go through tape fairly quickly in our large office. Most of the time, that information is housed in the person's head, whoever's responsible for ordering office supplies. So if something were to happen to that person, you can see how it could quickly get chaotic with office supplies, and you know how we all like our office supplies. So the Kanban cards are a way that after you get towards 10 rolls of tape and you put a card there that says time to order, And you can even have on there what the product number is and who you order it from. You can be as specific as you want, but at least everyone can see then, okay, I took the last roll of tape before the Kanban card, so I need to let the office manager know that they need to order more tape. Or I can actually take that card, give it to the office manager, they can order more, and then refill the inventory and put the card back where it goes. You can also go so far as to create a chart that is a common document that says where each Kanban card gets placed, like before the 10th roll of tape and before the 5th box of paper clips and before the 2nd box of mail labels, whatever the case may be. That way there's a schedule and you take it out of the person's head and into a common document that becomes a sustaining piece of your office lean, so you don't have to think about, oh, when do we need to order supplies, which is kind of like poka-yoke. You're saving your brain for something more important. So you don't have to think about when you need to order it. Plus, if something were to happen to that person, you have a much smoother and more efficient way of ordering office supplies because you have that common document that's available for whoever needs to order it again. So that's just another office lean tool that is, it's very simple in principle, and this really, in my opinion, the size of your organization will dictate how complicated it needs to be. For me, a Post-it note on the last copy, that's worked for us. Any questions before we move to step 3?
Nope, there's nothing there right now, Amy.
Okay. Well, like I said, step 3 and 4 and 5 will go quickly. Step 3 is shine, also called spick and span, which I tend to like that one. It gives you a better idea what it is. But it's your cleaning and inspection, and this also helps with your sustainability or sustaining 5S, which is your step 5. The cleaning and inspection is really focused on continuing steps 1 and 2 and maintaining a clean, clean, dusted, etc., office space. Keep in mind, it's not done during the initial deployment. Other than if you have the workspace completely empty, it's a great time to clean it. But it's not a focus on your very first deployment of going through for your very first sort and your very first set in order. But it is a system to maintain upkeep. And the key here is that you create the system. And our next step is standardize, so we'll talk more about that. But these all tie together because you have things functionally where they need to go, and you have cleaned things when you did your sort. Now you want to make sure that you keep things tidy, but then also you want to make sure that things stay in their functionally organized place. So you develop a system to maintain upkeep, and it includes inspecting as well. Is your supply closet still as orderly as it was? If you're using Kanban cards, are they still in place and functioning the way they should, etc.? So it's more than just cleaning. It's helping to make sure the process continues to be a circular process, like in the chart that I showed earlier. And here's an example of a sample schedule you can use. Once you have 5S deployed, next go around, here's how you can keep it maintained. For example, this says, the HR files. They're located in cupboard 10 in the HR department. John is the person responsible. Every Monday, he's supposed to go through, spot check files, make sure they're orderly, make sure things are where they need to be. And if John's out of the office on Monday, well, then Jim needs to do it. Here again, to me, this is for a large organization. You do not have to have so much detail. However, it does need to be spelled out in a system that makes sense for your organization. And the reason is you want this to become standard. You want it to become standard, and you want to be able to sustain it, which sustain is number 5, and we'll get to that. But through the SHINE process, it helps you identify if steps 1 and 2 were really as good, if you will, were really as effective as you originally thought. So if over time, let's say you decide to shine every month in a certain area, and let's say your supply room, you decide to shine your supply room every month. If whoever's doing that spick and span, quote unquote, audit, so to speak, of the supply room, if they start noticing that, things are starting to get out of place, or it's not real organized, or the staplers, instead of being in the supply room, they're being left at the copier, well, it's time to address that. Why is that happening? Did we not set an effective permanent home to begin with, and should we move it? Or are people just getting too busy to put things away like they should? So it starts to get to the root of some of these efficiencies, and you may identify additional waste that you didn't see the first time. That's one reason for SHINE. And as remember in Kaizen, part of the philosophy is continuous improvement. So you want to facilitate standards for what has happened in steps 1 and 2. You want to develop policies. You may have workplace policies. Like, I know some businesses, your desk has to be clean when you go home at night. That's a policy. I can't, Victoria's like, please, no way. And, but you have different policies, and then also setting procedures. And you can also look at and workplace rules. Procedures is the process. How are you going to do these things? What steps should employees take to make sure that all of this sticks? I guess that's the best way to say it. How do you make sure this all sticks and it's not just the flavor of the month? And then workplace rules, you can also have staff norms or working agreements, how they want to function. And this also helps give staff or volunteers a voice, that if something continually gets misplaced or not put back in its proper place, or let's say they put away a projector but the cords are all a mess, this is a time that gives voice to the people that notice it to say, hey, this isn't the way we operate. And because someone put this back in a real messy way, I had to take the time to fix it all, which took twice as long as if the other person would have put it away effectively. So creating your own internal standards. And again, having your maintenance calendar that helps you, again, steps 3, 4, and 5 really are about making it stick, internalizing it. And then step 5 is sustain. I love this one book I read. It said self-discipline instead of sustain, self-discipline. And you know what? That really is what, especially for your personal workspace, that's what it boils down to. Once you've effectively completed your sort and you're set in order, assuming that those were done effectively, all you need is the self-discipline to make sure that you keep it neat and tidy. So November, I will tell you how it went organizing my workspace, and this winter you can check on me and see if it's still organized. And step 5, it's making sure that 5S is in the daily routine. And I find it very interesting that in 5S, the whole philosophy and the methodology, it incorporates sustainability within the process itself. I can't say enough how this just helps make it stick. So you want to be very intentional in planning and thinking about how can we make sure this gets integrated in our culture and that we never let it go. Think about it. If you have your whole office place efficient, you have integrated 5S, everyone is on board, everyone has their workplaces that are functionally organized, you have all the common places functionally organized, and then if you start to let that slip, one, waste is creeping back into your system, and two, you essentially lost all that time that you built ramping up and implementing 5S. So that's why sustain is so important. Here are some ideas, to train everyone. And obviously that takes time and you want to do it in steps, but having people involved in cross-functional teams is a great way to have them get trained. Make sure that new staff understand that 5S is a priority and this is how you do it in your office. And that goes right back to step 4 in standards that we were talking about, having your policies, your procedures, your working agreements. That way, when a new person comes on board, they understand that this is important and how to do it, and there's documentation to help them through the process. As you have ideas, like the idea to put things most used on your dominant hand side, share those best practices. And then repeatedly communicate the purpose and why it benefits the workplace organization. And I didn't include a lot of slides about the benefits of 5S or why you would want to do 5S. I figured as we went through it, it may be obvious, but we can definitely talk about it if you have questions on that. But when you think about the majority of office waste that we had talked about having, you enter data in multiple places, you can't find information, or you store information in 2 places, or you have to ask someone for the information because you can't find it yourself. 5S solves a lot of that. Now, it's not a panacea for a perfect office by any means, but it is a great place to start and is one reason why Office Lean implementation usually starts with 5S. And you can see how it can start with you personally. And then if you're in a larger organization, maybe you personally, and then your departments, and then divisions, and it can build from there. Just to remind you of the steps again, you sort everything using the criteria for the 5 buckets. I even have materials that they are so detailed that it even has a spreadsheet you can use for the sort to identify each item and how often it's used and where you want to put it. To me, that's definitely like, please just poke my eyes out because that's so much detail. I can't handle it. Other organizations need that kind of detail, and if I needed that in this organization, I would clearly have Karen Thompson come beside me and help me because she's much better than I am. But sort, make sure you have everything sorted and then set it in order. Put it in a functionally organized place and make it obvious where it should be. And then shine, which is like your consistently periodic, predetermined time once you're fully deployed of when you clean and inspect work areas. You standardize, in other words, making sure that 5S is incorporated in your policies and your procedures, and so that it can be sustained throughout your culture. And this is in your material sheet as well, but some of the references, most of the references that I used for this training. And again, as always, my email and contact information. With that, I will open it up for questions or discussions. While we're waiting for questions, I just quickly wanted to say an evaluation will pop up on your screen immediately after this webinar. Please complete the evaluation form. I really appreciate having feedback, and I look at the feedback to figure out how to make things better in the future for additional training or how to improve my webinar skills. So I really appreciate your feedback and your constructive criticism, or if there were things that you really liked, I like hearing that as well. and 1 is low. Okay. So it will ask you on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is low and 5 is high. So like a sporting event, 1 is not many points and 5 is a lot of points.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, with that, since we don't have any questions, again, I don't want to cut anyone off prematurely, but no need to keep people on the line if there aren't any questions. Keep in mind that what I just gave you, again, seems very simple, and however, it can get very deep very fast. And so the key is to figure out what works for you. Have your cross-functional team figure out what would work for that workspace and what would work for your organization, because you don't want to make it so complicated that it doesn't stick. You also don't want to do it so quickly and just breeze through and say, okay, well, I sorted that and I put these things in the place here, and then it doesn't stick either because you didn't fully go through every process and document things. That's one of my problems. To get personal, that's one of my problems at home. My husband hates my piles, and so every once in a while I'll clean and I'll put them away, but I've not developed a system, an effective system, because about 3 months later, here are the piles, and then my husband yells again, and well, not really yell, but gets frustrated, and it's like, okay, I'll clean it. So he was actually real happy to hear I was studying this as well, because I'm going to try to use it at home in addition to my workspace.
Okay, we have one question that came up. Amy, if you had to pick one book for further reading on 5S, what would you recommend?
Oops, that is a great question. And there are a lot of nice materials on the web, like in SlideShare. There's a couple of different things. You can see one that I used. But I really think the one that I used a lot is this last one, 5S for Service Organizations and Offices. And that is the one that had the charts in it. And he also called it blue tagging instead of red tagging. But again, we talked about the covers. But I would say 5S for Service Organizations and Offices is a good one.
And I'm not seeing anything.
Well, thank you so much, and please complete your evaluation forms. Thanks again to BHK Center of Excellence for providing these webinars, and I had a lot of fun providing and learning along with you, and I hope that you receive a lot of value from it. And I would love to hear your stories about Office Lean, your challenges and your successes as we move forward. Thank you, and have a great day.